Mrs. Carter worked with Habitat for Humanity in communities throughout Georgia and globally for nearly 40 years. More from Liz Kennedy.
In 1984, Jimmy and Rosalind Carter created the Carter Work Project, working alongside volunteers with Habitat for Humanity, building and advocating for affordable housing. It was an experience that fulfilled the couple.
Every time we've ever been out as volunteers, leading a project, no matter where it's been, either in this country or around the rest of the world, at the end of the Habitat project, we always feel that Rose and I got more out of it than we put into it.
The former president once said Habitat provides a simple but powerful avenue for people of different backgrounds to come together to achieve those most meaningful things in life. A decent home, but also a genuine bond with our fellow human beings. I'm Liz Kennedy.
Carter is widely revered for his championing of human rights. His brokering of the Camp David Accords with Egyptian President Anwar Sadat and Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin in 1978 remains central to his legacy. Carter also received the Nobel Peace Prize in 2002 for his efforts to push for peace across the globe. Carter also became the oldest living U.S. president in history after the passing of George H.W. Bush, who died in late 2018. Lisa Carton, NBC News Radio.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter. The Family Meeting.
This is Dr. Sharon Bethany. She's at Northeastern Illinois. It's to teach us about the history of Haiti. And think about this in the context of colonization that has caused things like what we see going on at our southern border.
When we talk about colonization, they choose to destroy and kill and massacre the people. So that began to happen. Indigenous people of that land begin to die out because they have diseases and wars.
Sundays 4 to 6 p.m., The Family Meeting.
I'm Smokey Bear, and I made an assistant to help you out, because only you can prevent wildfires.
Hey, Assistant Smokey Bear, call me Papa Bear, because I'm grilling up dinner. Do you get it?
Yes, good job.
So, what should I do with all these coals?
Don't just toss them out. Put them in a metal container, because those embers can start a wildfire.
I understand. The stakes are high.
Ha, 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 ha.
Learn more at SmokeyBear.com.
Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk, where facts matter.
We are back, baby. We are back. We are back. Yeah. Classic. We are back. We are back.
And I've been waiting to say this so long. Let's go! And coming to you from just the basement of WCPT 820 AM in the city of Chicago, this is the Sports Cubicle. It is the time where the inmates run the asylum, and the boss, he's on vacation because it is holiday time, and we're working overtime. We're getting in trouble. Family Meeting will be back, everybody. Don't worry. But for the next 2 hours, it's none but sports talk. Let's get to our esteemed panel, everybody. Now, for the first time in a very long time, he's not in the middle of nowhere where he lives. He's not on the south side at Rate Field. He's the palatial and Paul Shivari. What's going on, Paulie?
Hey, I'm glad to not be in a cornfield right now.
And he's not at Wrigley Field. He's not at Northwestern. He's not at DePaul. He's not at a sports game. He's not on Zoom, everybody. It is the marvelous one, Dan Marver. What's going on, Marver?
Not too much. You guys look great in person for the first time in many years.
I wish we could say the same about you.
Thank you.
And for our final one, from Mr. Bears era, I don't have a nickname for him. I don't have anything fun because he's here Monday through Friday. It's Mike Mercado. What's going on, Mercado?
No Zooms, no home offices, no phones. It's just the boys around the cubicle talking sports to end 2024. What's going on, everybody? What's going on, Chicago? It's been an interesting 2024, to say the least, huh? And it's going to end with a very big news story that we actually heard coming into this, and that is the passing of former President Jimmy Carter, of course, who lived to the age of 100. And there is so much that you could say for him socially, politically. For somebody like me who was born in 1990, I know more of him from his pop culture references. And as the years have gone on, I think history has been kind to Jimmy Carter. But these kind of things are really interesting. The history of dead presidents and where we're at, right? How many generations have seen this, and how many times have we seen our presidents get to the ages of 80, 90, 100? So before we are able to talk about sports and some fun, I think it's important that we acknowledge a very serious topic, that regardless of where you are on the political stream, the United States president has passed away, somebody who was well renowned for his humanitarian work and was at the very least a great representative for the country, for our country here in the United States. Paulie, I know this is something that you thought was really important as you were breaking down the agenda we're going to have on a fun end of the year edition of the Sports Cubicle. But you have any thoughts? I know you're someone like me who always reference things in pop culture. Jimmy Carter, one of those presidents that has definitely hit the pop culture zeitgeist over the last 20, 30 years.
Yeah, we're looking back at 2024 on this episode, all the things that kind of happened in this year. And then there was a lot of breaking news this week, that kind of added to looking back at the year. And, this is probably like the third or fourth time I feel like I was in a studio in 2024 where there was breaking news and we had to pivot from what we originally planned on talking about to address the most breaking news. And Jimmy Carter, the 39th president, oldest living president, ex-president, 100 years old. Amazing that he made it to the century mark. Wanted to vote for Kamala Harris and he got to. So, just kind of an interesting career when you look at, his presidency might not have been the most successful one and a one-termer, but when you kind of look at, kind of the man and what he stood for, probably the nicest person to ever be president, maybe even the most humble person to ever be president, considering some of the people that have been in that chair and the decisions that you have to make. And while he also may have his sort of issues that most administrations have, it's still someone to look back on, and especially here at this station. It fell on us today to talk about it because whenever this would have happened, whoever would have been next up live on the air would have been the one to talk about it, and it happened to fall on us today. So we had to make sure that we talk about Jimmy Carter and what he means to the United States of America.
Merry Christmas, management. Devin, before we throw it to the person who would have been the most aware around in the political discourse at that time, you're somebody closer to my age where a lot of it would have been from his pop culture references. Any thoughts on the passing of former President Jimmy Carter?
I mean, living to 100 is just something impressive to do. I mean, Betty White came close, couldn't get down to that. It's definitely a sad time, obviously, especially in the just crazy political state where we are so divided as a country here. I definitely feel this is something that could sort of bring us back together in a sort of sense there. And it's just one of those sad things. I mean, Jimmy Carter, for the past, year and a few months now, he's been on death's door. We saw the former First Lady pass away before him. And all I'm going to say is, Jimmy Carter, I'm just glad he's finally at peace now. But for a guy who was 100 years old, too, he also kind of had all his marbles for the most part. I will definitely give him that. It's sad anytime someone passes away, obviously, but, a former president who, was really big in the solar movement, as WCPT has been very hard pushing that. It's a little disappointing to see, but, as you said, his pop culture legacy and, a lot of him building houses for homeless people, and other former presidents started jumping in. You think the Bush family going to do that if Carter didn't start that? Probably not.
What you think, Marvelous? You're somebody who was around the passing of a president, hit how long he got to live, his legacy.
I mean, he was a decent man. He was the governor of Georgia. He was a long shot, kind of like Obama, a very long shot. And he benefited from the fact that there'd been the Watergate crisis involving Nixon. Ford was the man in the office who was never elected in anything outside of the state of Michigan. But be that as it may, he was able to knock off Ford pretty easily. And then his presidency, was really, he accomplished a lot. But the problem was there was this thing called Arraign Hostage, which really did him in. Ted Koppel started this show at that time where every night on ABC he'd talk about how many days there'd been hostages. So it was really at the forefront of everything. And it turns out that Reagan won the election. I mean, the governor, actor from California, beat him in 1980, and the hostages came right out. So that was a really big issue at the time, in addition to all the issues that they always have to deal with. But a decent man, very religious. In fact, he once admitted that he once had lust in his heart. He had to admit that, because he was such a religious guy, Georgia guy, Plains, Georgia, small town. And like you guys all said, it's always sad when an ex-president passes away and he gets reviewed and chronicled. And in this case, it was kind of like something we knew was coming. Obviously, it wasn't like JFK or anything, where it was he'd been in hospice to the best of my knowledge. So, and he had a 70-plus year marriage. A model marriage and such. There were no scandals there. God rest his soul.
Godspeed, President Carter, dead at the age of 100. And we are going to move on to some fun. We talked about the pop culture stuff.
And, of course, phone lines are open, 773-763-9278. Give us a call if you want to talk about anything sports-related.
And that is the beginning of the fun, is being able to talk to the audience. We haven't got a chance to do a live chit-chat with the audience here on Sports Cubicle on WCPT 820 here in Chicago. And you know what isn't fun? Is a 6-3 ball game on Thursday Night Football, and it's covered in fog, and sell the team is the chant that goes on. And it was an interesting Thursday night game that we had to witness, right? How is it possible, at least for me, this is something that we haven't been able to do live, how is it possible for the Chicago Bears to be simultaneously very interesting and frustrating and boring all at the same time? So I think big picture, right, of the sell the team, I think that's the big story, right? It's just the frustration from the fan base that you're seeing from Chicago. And I think it really comes down to incompetency. You're looking at a team right now that fired its head coach, has fired its offensive coordinator, mysteriously fired their defensive coordinator, interviewed the guy who is currently their interim head coach and picked Shane Waldron over him. There is confusion whether Kevin Warren is the guy in charge or if it's Ryan Poles. And, of course, the ultimate question, will the McCaskies be willing to pay or listen to a strong-minded head coach? So if you're looking for your Ben Johnson or your Joe Brady's, are they willing to pay for them? Or if you're looking for your Vrabels, are they willing to take the heat from somebody who's going to demand respect? This is why people are saying, sell the team, sell the team, sell the team. It's beyond just a roster. You can look at a bad team and be like, oh, they're missing a quarterback, they're missing a running back. You're looking at something that's on the foundation, it's rotten. And it starts all the way at the top, but how often does an NFL team get sold, let alone when the team that is owned by those ownership, it's the only thing that makes some billionaires on the cusp of building a brand new stadium. Paul, you're the only person here who doesn't have a vested interest in the Chicago Bears. Doesn't have an interest.
I do, but I'm not living and dying like you guys are.
Name your fave 5 Chicago Bears songs.
All 5 of them.
The Super Bowl Shuffle, Bear Down, Chicago Bears.
I didn't know there was more than one.
So obviously you watched your team today kind of determine where they're going to be in the NFL draft in the Vegas Raiders with a very good showing. So watching what Chicago's going through, what are your thoughts of what happened on Thursday night, the roster they have, all of this chemistry going on in the lab that has culminated into a 10-game losing streak and a disappointment of a season? What did you think from the outside looking in?
There's not a lot of silver lining you can take out of what you've seen with some of the performances. How can you have 3 really good wide receivers and DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, and Rome Odunze, and he's only total 72 net passing yards, for the day. All the sacks, the offensive line gets blamed a lot, and they should, but there's more to it than that. Some of the coaching decisions, even post Eberflus, and I think some of that is structure. We can break that down. I'm sure we're going to do that over the next few weeks when they start interviewing people and ultimately land on whoever the guy is now that's doing it, Brown or whatever. That seems like the lazy Bears thing. That seems the White Sox thing to do. The Bears, I could see going with a former coach if it's like Rivera, someone like that. I could see them also promoting some coordinator that we don't know yet.
So I'm looking at a list of Joe Brady and Ben Johnson, kind of the offensive coordinators.
Do you think they're realistically going to be coaching the Bears next season?
The issue is who else is available. If you look at all of a sudden, let's say the Dallas Cowboys job becomes open. Are you willing to go to Dallas over Chicago?
But is Jerry going to go with the offensive coordinator?
See, when you start asking questions like that.
That seems like a Vrabel job to me, or a Pete Carroll. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
So then if you're Chicago, you're asking yourself, especially if the Giants just won today, they've taken themselves out of the best number one pick and a nice landing spot for Ben Johnson. So if you're Ben Johnson, are you thinking to yourself, I have Caleb Williams for another 4 years in his rookie deal. I could work with DJ Moore and Roman Dunze. It all comes down to what is management and ownership looking for. Because you hear the keyword, the buzzword. The worst thing you can hear as a Bears fan, they want a leader of men, somebody who represents Chicago, opposed to just saying, we want somebody who wants to win football games. We don't care if they don't go to church with Virginia on Sundays, but that's what they care about. And that has been a consistent issue. Marver, the entire season, you've seen the good and bad of Caleb and Roman Dunze and DJ Moore. You've seen the passing game coordinator become the offensive coordinator, become the head coach. And people are wondering how this team is a dumpster fire the way there is when their rookie quarterback is getting sacked more than anybody else in the NFL. When you heard sell the team, what were your initial thoughts on Thursday night?
Sell the team, unlikely. I mean, it's going to be, it would be like dishonoring the Hallis name or something, it seems to me, in the minds of the remaining ownership. But aside from that, I mean, ironically, Caleb Williams has actually been making progress. He didn't have an interception for a very long time until the last play of the game that he participated in, where he threw it up for grabs. But obviously, you've been talking about even the timing thing with Eberflus. It looked like there was a timing thing even in this game. Mm-hmm. And I was conflicted. A 6-3 game is enough to put you to sleep, but I was very conflicted because that Thursday is like one of the big days of the year for me, where you have Pontiac, Centralia, Hinsdale, all the big tournaments in high school, which I really enjoy. And I have like 5 TVs streaming them, so I had the Bears on the side and a little TV. So, so I did see what was going on. It reminded me of the Washington game on that Thursday night, like 2 years ago. Wasn't it about 6-3 or something like that?
12-7.
Yeah, I knew it was single digits for somebody. So, I mean, Seattle still has something to play for, although the Rams are probably going to win that division. But, as it turns out, the fans, including my daughter who was there, got very lucky. In fact, this whole week has been pretty lucky. We would have had about 15 inches of snow if it had been cold. So their last home game of the year turned out to be a little wet, but it was actually balmy for Chicago conditions. So in that standpoint, they benefited. And like Paul said, 3 great receivers and whatnot. So what are they doing? I guess the whole question is, what do they do in 2025 now? You know, they obviously Williams is going to still be here. He's going to be the future of the franchise. And he does have certain skills, we'll have to admit, and obviously game management he'll have to work on, but that might be a function of what's coming into his ears. I keep thinking about the end of the Thanksgiving game while he's waving his arms around his head while the clock's ticking down. I'd really like to know more about that. What was the issue? Couldn't he hear? I mean, or didn't they tell him what to do? Because that was troubling too, and even it looked like he had almost in the same type of feeling in the last game against that they played the other night against Seattle, where he wasn't quite sure what they were telling him to do. So he said afterwards that he really was unsure actually about the play. So that's a little troubling. I mean, aside from the fact that Brown on the sideline gives you a little bit of a Tomlin vibe, there's nothing much else I can say regarding that. I mean, he looks like he could be the right guy, and to go outside. I mean, you mentioned Rivera. He's an ex-Bear, so that would give him some props on that. But I don't know if anybody with this roster, I don't know, if some Dan Shula or anything.
The rumors that Pete Carroll actually wants to coach this team, which I mean,
it's its own thing. I think you should be interviewing everybody. Yeah, but you should be interviewing everybody. Right. You should be talking to everybody because the Bears get way too comfortable in their own family.
I realize Shula's not available, but he had that one undefeated season, was my point.
Yeah. So some things I wanted to jump off really fast because I know we have people, the line is buzzing right now, and we're going to throw it to Devin. And really fast, the offensive line play for the sacks, you can blame Caleb a lot because he does hold on to the ball a lot. Mm-hmm. You also have to blame a third-round project playing left tackle, a line that has been dismantled and is just absolutely poor, play calling. It is a lot of things kind of all into one. The interception streak is great, but it also means you're not being aggressive enough. It also means you're not pushing the ball down the field. So there are a lot of things that are big picture wrong with this team. Devin, sell the team.
It's one of those things. I've been seeing this a lot. The team is on a huge losing streak. The fans are chanting, sell the team. And we all know how I feel. Jerry Reinsdorf, you need to sell the Chicago White. Oh, wait a minute. We're talking about the Chicago Bears now? Holy crap! Where are the Cubs games, the Blackhawks games? It's insane the way this is going right now here, especially a team like the Bears had so much promise at the beginning of the season. Starting off 4-2, looking amazing. That Jaguars game in London, you actually wanted to wake up at 8 a.m. and watch the team. Now staying up till 8 p.m. to watch the team on a Thursday night felt like a chore. It was putting me to sleep right now. And this is just, it doesn't, me and Marv are talking about this all the time. It's like, what the bleep has to change to get this team on the right track here? Pete Carroll, I think, would be a fine example as we see what he did with Geno Smith in Seattle and how Russell Wilson tanked in Denver here. And it's just so frustrating to see this team that we had high hopes for, a rookie quarterback, and who's getting the most hate out of anyone here. Unless he goes 6-0, people not care. Mercado, you want to say something?
Remember who this team did an interview, who's about to take his team to the playoffs, who played for this team. We talk about teams that had an inside track. Jim Harbaugh.
But the rumor there was that Harbaugh had no interest in coaching
because who's the president of the Chicago Bears? Kevin Warren. So once again, they have put themselves in a position, whether knowingly or not, the Chicago Bears are in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Very much so. But right now, I want to throw it to somebody because I believe, is that Jim from Chicago?
Yeah, line one.
Line one. Jim from Chicago! Welcome to the Sports Cubicle.
Hi, gentlemen. First of all, let me say about Jimmy Carter. He warned Americans about American oligarchy since he left office. He could tell with the rise of Reagan and money in politics that was going to choke democracy. And now we're at a place we've got a billionaire, supposedly billionaire president, with about 15 billionaires in the cabinet. That's his brain trust. Mm-hmm. So he predicted this after he left office in the 1980s. But anyway, which is a tragedy, but that's our tragedy. But speaking of tragedies, the Bears, the Bears had a break because they were in a weird division. I mean, Detroit was a perennial loser. Minnesota wasn't that great. Now, you've got Detroit as the best team in the division, probably. I even see Green Bay might be better, and the Vikings. So they look like they're perennial bridesmaids for the next God knows how many years. And I'm not that crazy about Williams. They think he's good, but I don't see it. I mean, nobody can lose 10 games in a row. I don't know who cares what the schemes are and the coaches. They got 17 coaches in the booth. If they can't figure out how to win a couple of games, that's their problem. But the reason I called was I'm interested in the college bowl game, Notre Dame and Georgia. I know the Georgia quarterback is going to the NFL, but my favorite player in college is Jeremiah Love, the back for Notre Dame. I think he's a blue chip. He's got to be worth $20 million coming out of college. And I don't know if he'll play because you got to remember these young guys now, they have insurance policies on them. And they, depending on what they might be rated in the draft and how much they would get if they get $10 million, $20 million, whatever it would be. And the point is, do you play him every down or what do? You don't want to hurt the poor kid
for his remaining college.
Yeah, before he gets paid. I mean, that's the thing about college.
I guess that'll be ultimately up to him, right? I mean, don't we see players make this decision for themselves?
Sure.
And you're saying in the playoff, will that jeopardize Notre Dame's chances of trying to beat Georgia?
Well, yeah, but every team, think of it this way. There's 12 teams in this playoff now, so you've got an extra couple of games. You got maybe 3 games if you're going to win the championship.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of games, and you've got a lot of blue chip players involved. And are they going to, their family, they got to consider their family situation. They've got to consider their futures. So it's going to make for, it's just going to make for a strange. The thing is, I know the quarterback for Georgia's already bailed out because he's going to the NFL. So I don't know who's going to quarterback for Georgia.
Yeah, that's always been a problem with, like Marshall winning the Sun Belt this year, and they're not even playing in their bowl game because 19 guys have already entered the transfer portal.
Cam Ward in the middle of the game literally knows.
You point to me like he's going to end up on the Raiders. They're drafting 8th now. It's
that's done with. I'm sorry, buddy. Yeah. You're not getting Shador or Cam anymore. Jim, there's some interesting stuff you brought up. Just to make anybody feel better, if you're worried about the 10-game losing streak, which you should be, and there's not many silver linings. Never forget Peyton Manning, and nobody's comparing Caleb to Peyton, but the greatest quarterback arguably of all time went 3-13 in 1998, his rookie season.
That was a really rough Colts team, though. This was a Bears team that was primed to win.
By who, though? This is something I want to get onto in this episode. Is the only people who put expectation on the Chicago Bears were the Chicago Bears and Bears fans.
Yeah.
Because if you look at everybody else, nobody else was drinking the Kool-Aid the way we were.
But how much of that was because they're in the toughest division in the league, and how much of that is because maybe they're just not ready? Like, they got some of the pieces, but it's just not all clicking together yet.
¿Por qué no los dos? Why not both?
Yeah,
like, it could literally be that you're in a division where Sam Darnold is with Kevin O'Connell, the quarterback whisperer. Matt LaFleur is a great head coach along with Dan Campbell. Jordan Love is big hit or miss, but when he hits, he's huge. And Jared Goff has found the secret sauce in Detroit because maybe Ben Johnson is it, but that also is Detroit built a great offensive line. Detroit has great offensive weaponry. We know that Green Bay knows how to put a team together, and obviously Minnesota, even while losing J.J. McCarthy, have figured that out. So I think it's a little bit of A, a little bit of B, and
but I think if you change like 4 plays this season, they're like 8 and 7, or are going to be going to
Washington,
go for
Green Bay, Detroit. You just Minnesota, go down the list. Minnesota, you go down the list, and there's a lot of that.
Yeah, even Tennessee, they could have lost, except for Levis's
that's right,
underhanded pass. But I want to say a couple of things about the CFP. If the teams that were ranked 9, 10, 11, or 12, they would have played 4 games. Yeah. And even the picking process, where's Alabama? There's always going to be those questions. But in answer to the question, I hate the whole thing about the portal with regard to the bowl games. Caleb Williams did not play in the USC bowl game last year, and his replacement threw about 7 touchdown passes. So, I mean, that tells you something. But I'll take an example. There was a bowl game played yesterday, the college that I went to. Their top 2 receivers signed already with a portal with Minnesota and Texas Tech, so they weren't there.
Yeah,
and the other team the same thing. So particularly in that level of the MAC or the Mountain West, a lot of those players are gonna apparently 2 days after the season ended, the portal opened. So the Miami Ohio coach was on the phone for 4 hours. He said the day after they played the championship game, and the players were coming and going like crazy. So why can't they move that to January? And they say it's because of enrollment in college or what have you. And the NIL, that's a secret that not too many people are aware of. It's actually physical payment to the players. It's through a third party or whatever you want to call it, where they put it in some kind of dummy corporation, and they're actually offering them money to come there, clearly, to go to the other school. So the whole thing is a little messed up with the regular bowl games, and if it's going to affect the quarterfinals, that's even worse, in my opinion, because the whole point was to make this a real tournament with the real teams as they were at the end of the real season. But Georgia, there'll be a good crowd in New Orleans for them. They may be able to handle Notre Dame. After all, Northern Illinois did.
I'm
the famous Idaho Bowl champion, NIU.
I think in college football, where we saw the institutions, the coaches run roughshod through the players, holding scholarships over them. The fact is, not every player is getting paid $10 million. It's the good quarterbacks that are going to give your institutes that awesome volleyball and women's basketball court that we all need. That's going to help the men's baseball team build their stadium. All that matters. And I also think it's really hypocritical for people like Nick Saban to talk anything about NIL or portals when they were doing that to begin with. The difference was now we can all do it, right? Now you can't just be the only team that's at the poker table.
But when I do it, it's cute.
It's cute when I do it. It's ugly when you do it.
They're ahead of their time with the cars and the girls.
Yeah. All right, Jim, any closing thoughts right now?
Yes, I was going to say, I think all the quarterbacks, he's the most disappointing quarterback. He was drafted number 1, but out of that draft, I think every one of those quarterbacks got a nice pot of wins. Daniel's got a pot of wins with Washington. The quarterback for Denver. All those quarterbacks that came up.
Get it right.
Yeah, but they all won games. How did
J.J. McCarthy win? I'm sorry.
He was out. He didn't play. He didn't play. But the point is, he was outshined by the majority of the people. Remember, he made about $2 million a year in college. About $2 million a year he made. Then he got $25 million this time. But he looks like a horse. I played the horses all my life, and I know what thoroughbreds cost. And at some point, I don't care if you pay. They paid, I think, I don't know how many millions they played for the Green Monkey. He never hit the racetrack. The point is, that's my point. I mean, it's just crapshoot, but I think the Bears come up with snake eyes with this guy. But anyway, you guys have a great show.
You too, Jim.
Bye-bye.
You're the best,
Thanks,
buddy.
Jim.
Good to hear from you. I think Bears fans are very in the right. We're still in the early process of the scouting and watching the career
But
go
I think
through.
there's still like maybe 2-3 players away from being a complete team.
And the idea of...
With good coaching. They haven't had that in the last
exactly.
few years. They haven't had like a strong, like we could say, it was Eberflus, but it's like the whole structure was just bad to begin with. And is that Ryan Poles' fault? Is that the organization's fault? Is that just victim of circumstance where Eberflus didn't just put together a good staff? But they have to solve that issue in the offseason.
And, Bo Nix with Sean Payton. That's a totally different coaching staff they have there. Jaden Daniels is with Cliff Kingsbury and Dan Quinn as his head coach. And Washington was one moment away from losing that game. Who knows where their season goes in that direction. And if we're doing a redraft, is anybody truly in their heart really picking, other than Jaden Daniels, because that was the conversation.
Daniels, yeah.
It was Jaden Daniels, which, okay, Drake May and Michael Penix and Bo Nix, it was down to one or two guys, Jaden Daniels and Caleb Williams. And I believe, in my opinion, the Bears couldn't be wrong in this one, so they had to go with the consensus pick in that one. But let's just put it up there. If Jaden Daniels was the starting quarterback for the Bears, how many more wins do the Bears have?
It depends who's the more creative. Does William create second chances because he scrambles, or does he scramble because he has to create second chances?
To not get killed?
Yeah, to not get killed,
It's amazing. I mean, we were like... You're drinking the Kool-Aid at 4-2, with them not having played the 6 games against their divisional opponents yet, and they were improving, and they had the bye week at a perfect time after Jacksonville, before the Washington, and then New England and Arizona, which we figured they'd maybe win a couple of those and didn't. And then once they hit the division, they played all 3 divisional opponents even, actually. As it turns out, they were even games. So, it gives you the false impression that they're pretty close to being good.
All right, we're about to move on, but we have a few people that have been holding on, so we're going to take your calls and we're going to our next topic. So let's go to our next caller from the 815. Hello, 815. You're on the air with the Sports Cubicle.
It's Brian from Joliet.
Hey, what's going on, Brian? How you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing fine. I want to agree with Jim on the passing of Jimmy Carter. Very sad day, and what he said about him. But in regards to Caleb, I think that I think you got to give him a lot of slack. First of all, and I heard, I think it was Troy Aikman say that his first year he was like 1-11 in his starts. And I like to see Poles fired, and so you have somebody in there who knows what they're doing. I think I'd love it if Ron Rivera would become the head coach, and I think that they need to draft offensive linemen 1 through 7, because Caleb is usually running for his life, so he doesn't get injured. I mean, he could hardly set up without being sacked. And what else? And a lot of those games, you need somebody like Ron Rivera, because some of those games were just plain mental mistakes. So if you take the close games and you turn those into wins were just determined by a few plays, they might have been in the wild card situation. In regards to the Washington game, I don't buy that ruined the whole season, but I would have kicked Stevenson off the team after that, and that would have, you have to have the head coach in control, not the players.
Brian, let me ask you something, buddy, because I'm with you. I love Chico. I thought a few coaching cycles back, he would have been very valuable to have came into this team when they were looking for a different culture. But
before Mark Trestman came to the team.
Around that time, yeah. And I think right now the big issue is because you have a young quarterback and the way the league is going, you want somebody who's going to bring a different mindset on offense. But what is it about? Ryan, let me ask you this. Would you want the Bears to get somebody who would gel better with Caleb on the offensive side, who's going to be with Caleb for the next 10 years? Or do you want somebody like Chico Ron Rivera to come in and worried about any type of offensive coordinator, building a relationship with Caleb, and then leaving if, best case scenario, things are working well for the Bears?
Well, the only other one that I've heard of was, I don't even know his name, that has some interest, is this coach for the Lions.
Ben Johnson. Yeah, Ben Johnson. Yeah. So what would you think? Would you be okay as a Bears fan who has watched as many games as you are to have Ben Johnson, an offensive mind from what you've seen from Detroit, be the coach for Caleb Williams for the next 5 years?
Oh, I wouldn't mind if Ben Johnson came in. I just think that Ron Rivera understands. He coached for the Washington club, didn't he?
Yes.
Yeah, and did he get him to the playoffs?
Yeah, Chico's a heck of a coach. I think
7-9 record.
Yeah, it was a pretty bad team that he got in there. It was kind of a disastrous kind of run for him in Washington. Versus Carolina, he had kind of a nice long tenure there and some success.
He was part of the Super Bowl team.
Yeah. But it kind of overstayed his welcome after so long there, and then went to Washington, and it didn't turn out so great for him there.
But look at the common denominator on this, right? Go ahead, Ryan.
Well, I just want to say it's kind of both. You need somebody who's going to, keep the players in line and recognize who's the coach and that the players just can't do whatever they want to. On the other hand, Caleb is the future, and I think it's way too early. In fact, I was the quarterback for the great quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Super Bowl quarterback.
Roethlisberger?
Or Terry Bradshaw.
No, I'm going back to the
Terry Bradshaw.
Terry Bradshaw, of course. He said it takes 3 seasons usually, as a rule of thumb, before you got a real star quarterback. So I think it's way too early to judge Caleb.
Yeah, and I think the common denominator on everything is that it revolves around Caleb. And the thing people want in Chicago as a head coach is just somebody who's going to do the job right, who does the simple things correctly, who gets a play called in on time, who has time management, who has management of their timeouts, who knows how to throw a challenge, who knows game flow and game management. That is what, if you're listening to Bears fans right now, that is what they're asking for. When people say leader of men, it's a lazy way of saying somebody who's good at their job. And that's all the Bears want, is somebody who's good at their job, who doesn't make them look bad on national television time after time after time. And that is what a lot of Bears fans have seen this season. And when you hear names like Ron Rivera and Mike Vrabel, or the young hot names like Joe Brady and Ben Johnson, it's because of that. It's because we all knew Matt Eberflus was going to be fired as a defensive coordinator for the Colts if he didn't get hired as the head coach of the Chicago Bears. Like, that happened. That's real. So I don't blame Bears fans for going through the entire barrel of coaching searching.
It's very much that way it is right now, Mercado, here. And it goes back to like the Bears. For years, it was always, we need a decent quarterback. We need a good quarterback. And we got one, Caleb. We have a once-in-a-lifetime generational talent, and the results are still the same. And now it's forward, it's like, we need a new coach. And it's where are we going to find this coach, guys? I don't know what that is, but Brian, thank you so much for listening, and don't be a stranger, all right, buddy?
Well, thank you. Can I say one more thing real quick? I'm for 2 teams. The Bears, I've been a Bears fan since 1969, and any given day, whoever's playing the Packers.
I love that one. Have a good day, Brian.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, again, 224. You've been listening for 20 minutes. Stay on hold. Thank you. Who from the 224 do we have the pleasure of speaking with today? 224. Are you there? Or not? Let's go to our friend from the 847 who's sitting on there. Hello, you're calling from the 847. Who are we speaking with today?
Dave, Hoffman State.
Hey, Dave. Thanks for listening to Sports Cubicle. What do you want to call in about?
I got a couple of things. First and foremost, let y'all know, first I'm a Lions fan and then a Bears fan.
Oh, wow.
I've been quantity. But my best friend and he's diehard Bears fan. And I told him back then, you guys already had a quarterback. That kid that backed up Fields last year. He went 2-2. He came in cold, and he was accurate. He was mobile, but y'all wanted that bright, shiny thing. I told him he should have used it on front linemen. You needed front linemen then, and he did. I noticed with Williams, he gets so rattled he overthrows his receivers and stuff like that. He's going to be a great one, but like I say, he could have got himself killed, with no front linemen. So, and coaches, I don't understand. Nobody talks about what about Leslie Frazier.
Yeah, Leslie Frazier does come up from time to time, and it's part of that 85 Bears lore of guys that have played for that team and have gone on to coach, and he's currently with Seattle, who. I mean, they've had decent teams, and he's had past success, past head coaching experience with the Vikings. That's an interesting one. I mean, I guess if you're going to go that route, the defensive coordinator, it's like, that's the Rivera, Pete Carroll, Leslie Frazier. And that that raises the conversation. Does the pendulum really need to swing in the direction that they need to get that offensive-minded coach, or can they stick with a defensive-minded coach? But that's a whole different philosophical discussion on how to put together a coaching staff.
You were talking about the backup is Bagent, who's still there. Is that the guy that you thought might get a chance for the job? Probably not, because they would keep Fields before they play Bagent. But I hear you.
Because he went 2-2. He went in cold. He won 2 games. I was being watched the play. Just taking snaps with the practice team, more or less. the scouting team. So I don't know. Kids seem good. I mean, like Fields, he always had to cut the field in half, in a sense. Where his age, and he could see, who was his primary, secondary, whatever. That so. Or to take off running. I don't know. I was very high on him. I thought he was great. And then back to with my Lions, as I've eaten many a brown sandwich through the years. And they finally got it together. But we've always been snake bitten a lot. We lost, guys that got paralyzed, in the game. And they had a guy, that one year they had the guards. I'm thinking the other man, he got hit by a truck, got killed that following summer. They figured they would have been around 10 years. And then you have a great running back and no whatever, but it never connected. Now it has, but he got injuries, just like everybody. And but maybe the Bears got to do kind of like on the Lions did with the silent hero for this team now too is Chris Spielman. He's a special consultant, to them, and he only answers to Sheila Hunt, and he's helped put that team together too. So I hope, personally, I hope they could get to that big game. I don't know if it's going to happen, but I would truly like to see that Mrs. Ford get to do like Mrs. McCaskey did that time, get to at least hold and touch that Lombardi trophy.
Well, we'll see how the next few weeks kind of end up here. I mean, Detroit got 1 game away from the Super Bowl last year, and hopefully they can ride that momentum and that experience into something this year. Even though it's going to be a dogfight for the NFC.
Not just that, they're in a tough spot with the amount of injuries that team has gone through. Like that team, while having a lot of offensive weapons on defense, I mean, they have absolutely been torched. It's going to be tough for them for the Lions to be able to maintain. Think about if they're playing a team like Philadelphia or on a good night, a team like Washington. It's one thing to be able to put up 38, but if you're giving up 39, I mean, it's a big thing. It's a big thing Detroit's going to have to go up. I think they can do it. it's an uphill battle for that defense right now that's lost like 10 starters.
Well, they're due. They won 4 NFL championships between 1935 and 1957. And they did not win a playoff game until the 1981 season, and not another until 23. So they're the only franchise operational for the entirety of the Super Bowl era to not appear in the Super Bowl. So they're due.
Yeah, and talk about snake bit. You used the greatest defensive guy. They got Hutchinson to a broken leg, and Anzalone to a broken arm. And I think it was in the Bear game, the guy got his ankle busted on Thanksgiving. The one that, it's, but like Coach Campbell says, he's not going to moan about it and say this. He goes next man up. He's not going to use that as an excuse. And I'll leave it at this with President Carter, too. I served under him in the service and that, and I honor him, but he also, in 2002, he went down as a former president to Cuba. So in Cuban baseball, All-Star game, he was with Castro. And Castro was giving him some pitching tips and that, because I guess Castro had been a pitcher at one time in his day. And then he has also one, unlike our current president to be, coming on his second hitch, President Carter did not believe in enriching himself after they were out of office. He believed that they should be helping more, unlike, H.W. Bush, these guys taking these, $5,000 here and there, honorariums and that for speaking fees. He did the Habitat for Humanity and good stuff.
He was building houses. He was a great ex-president. He did a lot of great things.
Yeah, at least him and Roslyn are back together again. So, anyway, like I say, as the guy that's serving him, I salute you, President Carter, and Godspeed to you. But, anyway, let me clear out so we get to the other guys, but I just thought I'd show my 2 cents on this stuff.
Well, thanks, Dave.
Appreciate you, Dave.
All right, bye-bye.
I have to disagree with the Bajan thing. It just feels like Cutler, Josh McCown all over again. And, Bajan won some games. Let's not forget it was the sloppy Raiders from whatever they were at that point last year with, was that Jimmy Garoppolo? Who was
Brian
quarterback?
Hoyer.
Brian Hoyer, you're right. Oh my gosh, yes. And looking at the stats, Bajan 3 touchdowns, 6 interceptions.
4 in one game.
Didn't even in five games played. What was it? 4 starts.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Couldn't get to more than 94 completions. I mean, that's decent, but that's not a lot. So survives on his legs. 100 yards over 5 games. Not a lot. 2 touchdowns. There's potential there, but it's they would then they would have wasted all those draft picks and tried to build around that, and I think that would have been a crazy risky strategy.
And like I've been saying to everybody, when you look at the numbers, they're the same as Justin Fields between Bajan and Fields. The only thing Fields did more was rush more.
Thank you.
So sorry, people. Ellen Miller like to say he gets us results. No, he doesn't. Fields was the answer last year, and Caleb is the answer this year. Bajan is a backup, no more. His dad can arm wrestle me. I don't care.
I think there's a few things. I think it's still a little... I don't know why we are still talking about Justin Fields in the city.
I don't know why we're still talking about the Bears.
Yeah, we're 100% right. You know what, Paul? You are right a half hour ago. Yeah, you are 100% right.
I've been trying to wave you off, but it seems like you guys need closure. I'm here for whoever wants to call in.
Like it.
There's more to the world than the Chicago Bears, and I would like to move on. That's okay.
Let's get to that. What we're looking at I think it's been an up and down, a very interesting 2024 in the political, in the sports, entertainment world, and Chicago has been an epicenter of it. And I think one of the teams is going to be a big conversation with us besides the Chicago Bears that really highlights or is a low light of the Chicago 2024 sports calendars. Obviously, the Chicago White Sox.
Yeah.
We also saw...
You almost said Bulls. It doesn't even matter. You could have just said any team. Yeah.
You can't go wrong.
Just pick one.
And the stadium.
But I don't see them on this sheet.
No, there's a reason why. You got to keep searching. So why don't we Chicago sports 2024 before we look into 2025? I think I had a few notes that I really wanted to highlight. And before we get into the White Sox obviousness, I think the Cubs getting Craig Counsell and then missing the playoffs is a big story in Chicago sports. But I think that just goes to show how the summer was all about the anticipation of the Chicago Bears and what the White Sox were doing with their losing streaks and their chase for the record. What did you think about that kind of being the big summer story of 2024 for Chicago sports that wasn't Chicago Bears related, Paulie?
Well, 2023 was a disaster, and they found new ways to embarrass it. I thought 2022 was bad, and then 2023 did the whole hold my beer thing, and then it's like, well, how worse can it get? That was always the joke after 2023. How worse can it get? And they would find that new low. Well, then 2024 happened, and I think it's just we're so sick of hearing about it now, and then you see what they're doing in this offseason, and it's like, yeah, maybe they might be a little bit better than 121 losses next year, but I can't imagine that they're going to be too much better than that. So how long are we going to be swimming, at the shallow end here before we finally get like a taste of a real contending team again?
On any sport or just or any team?
The White Sox especially. I think they're lost in a completely disastrous sort of thing unless Chris Getz or some future savior comes in and develops an entire farm system, or Jerry just gets crazy on his deathbed and starts spending billions of dollars all of a sudden,
or just dies.
But we saw so much.
Yeah, but and then what happens? And then what happens?
Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, everybody.
Yeah, then what happens?
But this is where it gets frustrating if you're a White Sox fan, when they're talking about stadium locations and wanting to go somewhere and talking to the mayor of Nashville. Like, the White Sox, it was such a frustrating April to September with that team because it was constantly them getting in their own way, never being able to read the room. And I think for White Sox fans, it was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. I've seen White Sox fans completely just check out. Like, there's a difference between checking out because your team is getting steamrolled or you're just frustrated with the season. This is years of abuse, fandom abuse by the Reinsdorfs. And once again, it was the people they hired was, again, sus, as the kids say. So it's not like they even learned from their lessons.
Sox, very lizard brain hire. It's getting... Our intelligence has gotten insulted because I think there's a lot of fans that have pointed out that, metaphorically, when the guy was telling Tony to pinch run, Andrew Vaughn or Gavin Sheets or Adam Engel. Yeah, thank you, Adam Engel. Even though that probably wasn't really what was happening, it still looks like that's what was happening, and it's a smart fan base. And I think when you say that they've checked out, I think it's because a lot of people see this won't get better. Why am I wasting my time with this? And why is this team doing this to us other than trying to make money off of us? And the smart ones have figured out, don't go to the games, don't spend money, don't give this team any ounce of your time.
And that's where we're at right now, because this team is doing nothing but signing guys who are minor league players to major league deals at minor league prices here. And this team doesn't want to get better here. Chris Getz needs to go. I keep saying we're going to give him a little bit of cushion because it's his first year. But he weaseled his way into that position. You made your bed, Chris. Now I want you to lay in it for the next 10, 15 years, because Jared Reinsdorf isn't going to fire his loyal ones. And that's where the team's going here, Paul. We keep talking. We'd love to see them hire Blake or sign Blake Snell. All these guys would love to have seen come to the team, but they're not going to.
That's never going to happen. It's never going to happen.
They're going to throw that money away. They're never going to spend it. Andrew Benintendi is our highest paid player in history at $78 million?
Yeah, still haven't even cracked a nine-figure salary.
Other than the Moneyball Oakland Athletics, who are moving to Las Vegas, by the way.
Maybe.
Is that what your plan is? If we don't spend money, we can go to Nevada, we can go to Nashville, we can go to Nevada, we can go to whoever the heck wants this garbage team here.
Jerry would still find a way to mess it up. They're going to end up being like the Oklahoma City White Sox or the like somewhere very generic.
I want it to be something like the Nashville Rattlesnakes. Let the White Sox die in Chicago.
Yeah,
because that's the thing, Mercado. It's not so much that fans are checked out. We're done with this team. Me and Paul sat through the rebuild. We watched guys like Nicky Delmonico, Wellington Castillo, David Polka,
Daniel Polka,
as your guys that these are the guys that could potentially save the team. Dylan Covey going 0-7, but he's the top prospect pitching that we have this year. James Shields, I thought he was dead on the White Sox.
James Shields is pre-rebuild.
No, that's 35th in Shields. But here, I was going to tell you, there's some really good news. If you guys have Xfinity, you won't be able to see them.
What's great is I can see them for free with an antenna.
Don't get me started on this. We have three teams, the Bulls, Blackhawks, and White Sox. Teams that, other than the Blackhawks, are performing god-awful.
and they want to charge you $30 a month to stream those teams. I
But you
cannot
can get it for free if you have a good antenna.
I cannot say this on the radio, but you're watching on the feeds. Jerry Reinsdorf, this is for you.
Take 3 months of buying that stream, invest in a decent antenna, throw it up in your attic. Doesn't even have to be on top of the roof.
But the thing is, Paul, it goes back to what I'm saying with Mercado here. I don't want to watch this team. I don't want to give them any revenue. I told my family for Christmas, nothing White Sox. And
same here.
And that is where the thing is right now, Mercado, with the fans. We are done with this team. We're done going to games. We're done buying jerseys of guys who aren't going to be there in a year or two. We are done. And that's worse than being checked out. That is why the stadium was empty until they were almost losing the record. That is the only time they almost came close to selling out games. The fans are tired, the city is tired, and we're done. And I hope like hell this year the White Sox have like record 80 people per game.
I think it's just going to be more of the same for the South Side. I think there might be some glimmer of hope as the season goes on because it's just inevitable that it can't get any worse. You're literally the worst team in baseball history. But hope is not a strategy.
Yeah. Well, you got to be patient.
It's a new chance to set a new losing record next year. I mean,
been patient.
122 losses hasn't been cracked yet.
The Mets went at 120 losses in 62 and won the pennant in 69. Come on.
It's a 7-year turnaround.
I think
the Tigers had a 3-year turnaround. But none of those teams drafted 10th in the year after they set the record.
And they can't even do losing right. Yep. The White Sox can't even do losing properly. And something else that hasn't been done proper this entire 2024 has been the CHSN app, the rollout, the way it's been accepted, the way it's been adopted, the way it's been adapted to the consumer, the Chicago sports fan. And this was, again, one of these things where I use the Chicago Cubs as an example where when they knew the Marquee network, the Marquee app was going to be going on, everything in their tech department, their R&D, all that stuff that has to deal with their social media and getting things corrected on the digital side went all hands on deck to make sure that thing was ready to go for the consumer. There was so much time in between last pitch to puck drop to tip off that people had no idea how to watch White Sox, Bulls, or Blackhawks programming. And if it wasn't for the fact that the ownership and management put out bad products for all of those teams, nobody watched enough to care. So you can't even say that it was a decent rollout, it was a slow rollout. It was because nobody was watching that nobody cared how bad it was. People didn't care. They weren't going to break their neck going to the roof or going to the attic to put on an antenna.
Unless you're Paul.
God bless him. And people were going to spend $30 to watch a team. So this is not in a day and age where everything else is being streamlined to you and it works perfectly and gives you original programming. Mm-hmm. This is what they're offering you right now. That was a huge part of this year that and that is the Wirtz and the Reinsdorfs completely messed up something they had been planning forever. And the regional sports network story, we never thought would hit Chicago because of the fan base and the fervor that we see here as people who watch and cover the sports. But at the end of the day, it's still a consumer and a revenue-generated business, which means it costs money. And if it's not worth the value, people aren't going to buy it. And I think that's a huge story in Chicago sports. Maybe sports in general is how people are actually consuming the product.
Yeah. Well, when Marquee came out, it was during the pandemic, so nobody really noticed because I think that was the year when they didn't allow any fans in the stadium. Mm-hmm. So they eventually, I think after spring training, sometime during that first season, they did get a deal with the cable companies. But this situation here, I mean, I have such an old house that I had a roof on the antenna all along. But I went to channel 62, and all you could get was audio. And then they said that for an old antenna, all you'll get is audio.
Mm-hmm. Well,
so even that didn't work.
To be fair, Marvelous, you don't want to see who exactly is on the field here, but Marquee Network had a great launch because it was launched with Comcast and AT&T roped it into their cable packages. Mm-hmm. It was Marvelous. You were here during the Jerry Rouse era. He was on here fuming because he didn't want Marquee, but they gave it to him anyway.
I think there's also like a few months of a rollout too, where you knew that they were going to separate and create their own channel. Whereas this one was like, well, remember that NBC thing we were? Now we're this thing, which is funny. same was it same new boss, same as the old boss kind of sort of situation.
And Comcast Sportsnet on your cable box now just reads as channel unavailable. It's like, congratulations, guys. We crapped the bed so hard on this one. But hey, the only thing worse than our app and our channel are the teams we carry. Back to you, Jerry Reinsdorf.
So when you're asking for your fan base to spend money, when literally we saw an election that was all about the economy and how much eggs cost at the grocery store, these ownerships, more specifically the Reinsdorfs and the McCaskies, are asking for public funding while their app is garbage, while their team is garbage, while they can't buy land properly, while the Bears spent all this money and time getting land in Arlington Heights just for us to hear for an entire year them going from different selection to different selection to different selection of place to place to place here in the city of Chicago. The White Sox were doing the same thing. I think this might have been, I don't even want to say disrespectful because it sounds so serious because we're still just talking about sports. But if you've ever seen a year where the ownership of these multi-billion-dollar institutes that are professional sports do not care about the fan base on that level, we've seen it this year. They care if you buy the jerseys. They care if you buy the tickets. They care if the TV companies or the streaming companies want to give them multi-year deals. But they don't care if you want the Cubs to go all out and go get Juan Soto. The Ricketts don't care. Because winning 85 games, 86 games, is just as good as winning a World Series. Because that meant for 162 days, more specifically 81, you have a full packed house at Wrigley Field. And guess, if you need something to eat outside of there, they own everything. You need a hotel outside of Wrigley, they own everything. So why do you need to win 100 games? If you're the Bears, valued at $4 billion, before you even broke dirt at Arlington Heights, imagine what you're going to be worth once you build a new stadium. Do you think they care if they're the Kansas City Chiefs? They would love if Caleb Williams lucks into being that and they lucked into backing into that. That's the ultimate story in 2024 to me. It's just a realization for Chicago sports fans on what this era of professional sports ownership is like. I don't know, Paulie, I know for somebody like you, it's a little bit different because of how invested you are in these teams, but I just feel like that's what 2024 really showed from front office and more specifically the ownership in the city, that really there was a naiveness and almost a forgiveness that the fan base here, leave it to whether you say it's Midwest attitude,
we've been kind of submitting to these families for a long time. So we're talking about the original, the family of the daughter of the guy who signed the deal at the car dealership in Canton a century ago. The liquor runner, third generation now running the hockey team. The real estate guy who's my entire lifetime has been in charge of the baseball team and shortly thereafter the basketball team. When you're still answering to those people, then Ricketts is a little bit of a different thing, but I don't want to rope the Cubs into it. I think the Cubs are just kind of like they feel like they don't want to spend right now. They don't want to spend like Yankees, Phillies, Dodgers, Mets. For whatever reason, I have theories to that, whether that's justified or not. But, we got to remember that they at least figured out their stadium situation. And not a lot of ownerships are rich enough and crafty enough and careful enough to be able to do what they did. And, as much as I don't like what some of the people in the Ricketts family kind of stand for and what they do, I still have to appreciate that they did a great job buying both the stadium and the team for what they bought it for and turning it around to what they did. Now they just need to transfer into more wins than just that one World Series, because we're getting ever so closer to the thing I heard in 2016 is, 11 years ago is such a long time to be talking about a World Series that you won.
It's a good point, and I think if you're somebody like the Ricketts, you are grateful that you are coinciding with the city with ownership like the Reinsdorfs. But I think it's interesting you brought it up too. The Reinsdorfs, this was the same year where we saw the Reinsdorfs essentially spit in the face of not only its fan base by wanting to move from the south side, where 35th and Shields, but knowing full well that the Ricketts family went to the governor, went to the mayor, asked for money, they said no, and they did it all on their own, on their dime, and now have their entire cathedral
But that's a little different. Saving Wrigley Field is a lot different than saving the rate, or wherever the White Sox play, according to The Simpsons.
Sure, but they still said, the states and the city still said, we are giving you no money.
Yeah.
You go do what you want.
Yeah, so the audacity of, and we're still paying for the thing that they're playing in right now, and there's nothing wrong with it. We got to move on. This is the first hour of the Sports Cubicle. We barely got into Chicago. We got deep into the Chicago Bears. There's a lot of other stuff that happened
to live radio,
in the world of sports here, and we also got calls on the line, 773-763-9278. Let's get out of here for the second hour of the Sports Cubicle coming up next.
The Hal Sparks radio program.
We wouldn't even have Tesla if it wasn't for Barack Obama. Obama insisted that there would be funding for electric car companies in the rescue package in 2009. And Tesla was the single biggest beneficiary of it because they were further ahead, because Elon Musk had bought Tesla as a company outright and was pretending to run it, as he does right now.
Hal Sparks, Saturdays from 11 to 1 on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Texting privacy policy and terms and conditions posted at textplan.us. Texting enrolls for recurring automated text marketing messages. Message and data rates may apply. Reply stop to opt out. Consult a doctor prior to use.
You look amazing. What have you been doing? You've heard of Ozempic, Wegovy, and the other GLP-1 medications, right? Well, I found this great company called Zelfie. If you qualify, their providers can prescribe medications like Ozempic and Wegovy and other GLP-1 medications that are 80 to 90% less expensive, all 100% online. I can get GLP-1 medications for 80 to 90% less and do it all online? No doctor's office or pharmacy? Yes. Zelfie can help provide you with semaglutide or tirzepatide, the active ingredients in Ozempic and other expensive GLP-1s, but for 80 to 90% less. How do I get started with Zelfie? Just send them a text.
Text SOLVE to 200-300 to get started today with Zelfie to see if you're eligible. Get the same active ingredients in Wegovy or Ozempic, but for 80 to 90% less and 100% online. Don't wait. Text SOLVE to 200-300 right now for a link to your exclusive offer. Text SOLVE to 200-300. SOLVE to 200-300.
Are you tired of talking to yourself? We can get you an audience on the radio. You can produce and host your own radio show on one of our 2 stations. Please call 773-792-1121. That's 773-792-1121 and ask for Mark. Limited space available.
NBC News Radio, I'm Chris Coraggio.
Former President Jimmy Carter has died at the age of 100. Rory O'Neill reports.
News of the former president's death came from his son, who confirmed that Jimmy Carter died at his home in Plains, Georgia, where he had been in hospice care. As a young man, Carter served in the Navy, later managing the family's peanut farm, then getting into politics. He was elected governor of Georgia and then, in 1976, president of the United States, defeating Gerald Ford. Voters would turn Carter out after one term in office, a term plagued by an oil crisis, high inflation, and a hostage crisis. In retirement, Carter remained active in his church and in charitable work with Habitat for Humanity.
Carter was also a 9-time Grammy nominee and a 2-time Grammy winner in the spoken word category. He was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 2002 for his decades of conflict resolution work, particularly in the Middle East. Jimmy Carter and his wife Rosalind had the distinction of being the longest married presidential couple in U.S. history. They married on July 7th, 1946, while Jimmy served in the Navy. The couple raised 3 sons and a daughter. Carter once told reporters that his marriage to Rosalind was the most important thing in his life. The political world is reacting to former President Carter's death. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said Carter personified the true meaning of leadership through service, through compassion, and integrity. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries expressed his thanks for Carter's legacy and leadership, adding he was a great man, a great role model, and a great humanitarian. Georgia Republican Congressman Buddy Carter says the former president took office when America was at a low point.
It's certainly someone who came along at the right time. If you'll remember, it was post-Watergate, and I think America was looking for someone who was honest and pure, and he was that.
Congressman Carter added that the former president's legacy lives on through the Carter Center in Atlanta. He is not related to the former president.
I'm Chris Coraggio, NBC News Radio.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter. Think Theory Radio.
We're joined by Allie Mae Miller, hypnotherapist.
Hypnosis is portrayed in media in general. Manipulation, mind control. People think it's like a truth serum. My clients describe it as they're in control the whole time. It's definitely not a truth serum. The client decides what they share with me, even in a state of hypnosis.
Think Theory Radio with Damian Perdue. Saturdays at 6 p.m. on WCPT 820.
Update your home with help from Menards. Keep your home organized with closet-made closet kits. They're perfect for kickstarting your closet or pantry project. Find the closet solution that's right for you and save big money. The 6-foot satin chrome closet-made wire closet kit is $114.99. Good through December 31st. Plus, check out our weekly flyer on Menards.com for all the great deals during Menards New Year's sale.
Save big money at Menards.
Do you have over $10,000 in credit card debt? If you're feeling the financial impact with unprecedented economic challenges, DebtBlue is here for you. With DebtBlue's Success Guarantee, you pay nothing unless your debt is reduced or completely resolved.
I'm just living sky high right now. I'm very thankful for it, and the team at DebtBlue are phenomenal. They're able to work with you. They're great.
Call for your free debt resolution information now. 800-200-6895. 800-200-6895.
Hey Google, play WCPT.
Streaming Chicago's progressive talk from TuneIn.
And we are back. It's the Sports Cubicle, 773-763-9278. We're doing the Sports Year in Review because Paul Lacius is going to pull his hair out. That doesn't happen. But before we get to there, I want to hang on to the man who's been hanging out for a long time. Steve from Westchester, thank you for listening. What do you want to talk to us about today?
Well, I'm 75 years old, born and raised in Chicagoland, and I'm now fortunate enough to own a home in Sarasota, Florida, winter home. So this past year in January, I'm working out and in LA Fitness, and right 5 feet from me is none other than Frank Thomas. And I'm like shitting in my pants, and I go, oh my God, you're Frank Thomas. And he looks at me and he nods. And then inside I think, I want to talk to him. What can I bring up that might be of interest? And I said, Frank, I'm a Chicago White Sox fan from way back. And then I named for him the 1959 World Series team lineup that played against the LA Dodgers. I was 10 years old at the time. This was before Frank's time and probably all of your time. So from that moment forward, Frank Thomas and I, anytime we see one another, we pull each other aside and we talk sports. Now, this was before this miserable year that the White Sox just had. But, it's rare that you ever have an opportunity to talk to a first ballot Hall of Famer, arguably one of the greatest hitters of all time, and actually have him take time of his day to acknowledge me and go back and forth. I thought, it was kind of unusual to know a celebrity of that ilk, particularly when I myself was a high school and college basketball player of some note. So anyway, I throw that out. If you have any questions about Frank, throw one at me.
Just really quick, what year was this, Steve, when you bumped into Frank Thomas?
This past year, 2024.
And I'm curious, what were Frank Thomas's thoughts on this current White Sox just abysmal
Well,
office?
I mean, Thomas will tell you every day after the game if you stay tuned after that nonsense for 9 innings.
But what does he say when the microphones are off is what I'm really trying to get at, Paul.
Right. Well, let me explain that it's our winter home. So my experience with Frank would be January into, I think we came home in May. So the season hadn't begun. Now, when I go back this January, assuming that Frank still works out at LA Fitness, I'll be able to answer that question the next year time I talk to you all. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. I see, and you better report back to us, Steve, okay?
The season hadn't happened yet.
Yeah, sure.
The season hadn't happened yet, but I'm surprised he didn't talk to you about Nugenics.
Well, okay, I gotta. That's interesting because I asked him early on about Nugenics, and his comment was, for someone your age, I think you better talk to your doctor. And I said, Frank, I'm 75. I said, I appreciate that. He said, if you were 40 to 60, I'd say go for it. But I said, I believe in science, and I appreciate that answer because, he wasn't just trying to get a quick sale. But, yes, he is on TV down there. I don't know if they're still on TV up here with eugenics, but that is something that I'm aware of.
Flutie, and he do the commercial. Yeah.
All right, Steve, don't be a stranger, okay? Thanks for calling.
So it's interesting, right, that we have gotten to the point of White Sox talk that Frank Thomas on eugenics is kind of the more interesting of all conversations. But it was an interesting 2024, and it wasn't just interesting. It wasn't just fun. There were some really sad stories over the last few weeks that kind of end the year with some really big names, some big figures in the sports world no longer with us. And it was first Ricky Henderson and then Greg Gumbel. So for me, again, Ricky Henderson, obviously one of the greatest baseball players of all time. The records, the picture of him with the stolen base, how important he is to the lore of baseball and of a time when baseball was so popular and those teams were so popular. Ricky Henderson passing away, super sad. And then Greg Gumbel. So obviously for all of us who college basketball, I know Marver, somebody like you who absolutely adores and consumes all things that are men and women's college basketball. But again, talk about pop culture. From the references all the way to Gumbel on Family Guy. Like, Greg Gumbel was such a... You know how there's Kevin Harlan, and there's Al Michaels, and there's just guys that are bigger than the sport, that their call, or when they're on a desk and they're setting up a story, and they're telling you that day's matchups. That's what I felt like Greg Gumbel was home cooking. He was comfort food. There was something to listening to him. And all those great years of those shows on Showtime. And it's two sad losses in 2024 to end the year in 2024 that at least are such big names to highlight. Losing big titans of Major League Baseball and of sports media. Marver, any thoughts?
Yeah, on Greg Gumbel, I knew something was going on when, for the first time in a half century, Ernie Johnson revealed the bracket for the NCAA last March. So it was like when they turned the names over, I said, this didn't really happen, and Greg Gumbel didn't announce it. It was like almost like a fantasy that somebody else would be doing that because he was in that studio with the reveal for so many years. And he also, of course, was with CBS and did broadcast live football in the studio, of course, for so many years. And so, he had a great life and rest his soul. And Ricky Henderson as well. I hope they put that stolen base with him for eternity, though.
It's a heck of a gift at the Holy Gates for Andrew to see. Paulie, what do you think about these losses or any other losses in 24 that you can think of?
Well, Gumbel for sure was sad to hear about because it was he's like the standard for March Madness and just kind of his voice, just a familiar, comforting voice and been with us for so long, broadcasting CBS and NBC. So that was sad to see him go. Ricky Henderson was a total shock. Total surprise. For a day, it didn't even look like it was. It was just a rumor, and that was a little bit out of nowhere. Just being so young at 65. It's tragic hearing about this, but there is every year. There's always a list. When we compile it at the end of people that have passed, and then we see names. The controversial O.J. Simpson and Pete Rose. The legend in Willie Mays, Bill Walton, Jerry West, Fernando Valenzuela dying right before the World Series. Legends like Chichi Rodriguez, Bobby Allison, the tragic, untimely deaths of Johnny Gaudreau and Calvin Kiptum. Of course, Jimmy Williams, Bud Harrelson, Whitey Herzog. And these are just the names, kind of the bigger names. There's so many people, and even some of the local connections that we saw as well. Just a few weeks ago, Bill Melton, Bill Hay, Chicago Blackhawks, Bill Tobin, the GM, Chet Walker, Bob Love from the Bulls, Bob Avellini from the Bears, and Ken Holtzman, the former Cub, and I'm sure there's more as well with local connections, and it's just always sad to see that. And of course, as a Raiders fan, I see Carl Weathers and Jim Otto on this list, so I gotta point that out.
And it goes to, you bring up Carl Weathers again, pop culture, zeitgeist is bigger than the sport itself. And I talk about this when it comes to the NBA, but I think it's just a way of modern medicine and how some of these sports, a lot of these athletes are dying or have passed away from the sports world of baseball and basketball and, some football players. But the idea of, we're starting to see the generation of those old players that we grew up on, that of the legends, of the players from the 70s and the 80s are now getting older because they were in their 30s and 40s at that time. So it's really interesting to see some of these names that, O.J. Simpson, part of the zeitgeist, Pete Rose, part of the zeitgeist, Willie Mays, one of the most important icons in America history, period, beyond sports. And it's an amazing...
Jerry West, the logo. And he being part of not only great teams, but in modern pop culture with everything from Showtime, the Showtime Lakers show on HBO. So his name coming back up and people understanding, kids understanding. Winning time, thank you, yeah. And that's another thing, too, is some of these names, and this is why I appreciate social media to a certain extent, when names like this pass away, their highlights get hit by the algorithm. And because of 60-second shorts, 120-second shorts, people are able to digest a lot of content. A lot of people know who Roberto Clemente are come, Clemente Day, because baseball shares all these things. So I think this is maybe the one benefit of this era in sports fandom when we have deaths like this, is that they get their flowers.
Very much. And it's one of those things, we've seen so much happen this year, and then the deaths alone, and it's one of those things, is just time goes on, it's going to happen. It is, what is it, life, liberty, was it life, death, and taxes, the three things ever going to be guaranteed here? And, you see guys like Ricky Henderson, I almost said Ricky Hendon, because if you listen to WCPT, that's a common mistake to make here. And I just found out, I knew this was happening. Ricky Henderson was playing independent ball all the way until 2005. And then was doing random appearances in games all the way up till 2018. So it's like, this is a guy who never slowed down here. So I'm with Paul Acius. That was definitely one of the biggest shocks here.
He was at the last game at the Oakland Coliseum this year, which they named after him, Ricky Henderson Field.
It's also amazing? He stole all those bases, like 100. You could throw over to first base more than twice.
Yeah.
And everybody knew that he was going to steal. That's what makes it so remarkable. It's like, when somebody knows you're going to do it, and he still did it, despite the fact that the odds were against it, because the rules weren't like they are now, where it's actually easier to steal bases than it was when he was playing.
Fernando Venezuela, obviously culturally, and that's another thing too. So many cultural relevant names that we've seen here, and we brought up Kelvin Kiptum. Is that how you pronounce his name?
Yeah.
That was such a sad story, because if you don't know, he set the world record in the Chicago Marathon, right?
Yeah.
And
just like 4 months later, he died in a car accident in Kenya.
Like, how sad, like, again, tragic, like a tragedy in this, because some of the names we see are older men and women like that, have their legacy and coming off of one of the biggest achievements of their life for that to happen.
Well, you remember Johnny Gaudreau, he was about to stand up in his sister's wedding,
and both he and his brother passed away. So another absolute tragic thing, where the entire sports world, you talk about, going through all the different cultures and all the different streams and whatnot. That definitely did one too, where the Gaudreau brothers was an absolute heartbreaking one. So 2024 definitely did have a lot of those tear-jerking, heartbreaking moments of modern day, old school, and some great names of the time leaving us. And I think it's always important. This is why it's important to give people their flowers when they're around, not just the athletes, not just actors, not just musicians. Every day, make sure you're giving people their flowers, because every day people are doing great stuff, and if you get a chance to, make sure they know how great they are, because some of these guys do know that, some of these guys don't, and I think it was really interesting.
And I just want to say, all the WCPT listeners, y'all are great people. I'm giving you your flowers on the air right now.
Attaboy. So those are some of the names we lost in 2024. I don't know if there's anybody else you guys want to highlight, because there's so many names that we could spend time. We could literally spend an hour.
Quick list of all the people we had on the show this year.
Yeah,
I got that. Which was crazy, because I was like, well, looking back at the beginning 2024, who did we have on? And I thought some of this stuff happened last year, but it was this year. Dalton Castle, you remember we started the year talking to professional bull rider Dalton Castle to talk about how he raises the bulls that they actually use on that circuit, and the treatment that they actually do get, and how he's like, oh no, they're pampered better than the riders. That was interesting talking to him. Of course, we talked to Bob Apter, local youth hockey coordinator for the NAHL, the largest youth hockey league in the United States. Friend of the show, Josh Buckhalter. We got to talk to NU lacrosse coach Kelly Amonte Hiller, which was amazing right before their season started this year, where they ended up being the national runner-up of the season. Joseph Hodel, an author that we talked to about sports legends. Sid and Nandan Naresh,
those kids.
U.S. table tennis players, and I believe it was Nandan. You could see the fire in his eyes as a competitor, and Sid nerding out, talking about the drag of the ball while he's
air pressure,
and all
so
that.
So good.
Mike's old boss, Adam Coletta, who's a barbecue professional, great, delicious wiggle butt sauce. Devin's friend Keith Semple, singer-songwriter that we had on.
That was a lot of fun.
Of course, we talked to smart people too. Professor Michael Leroy, not to say anything bad about our other people, but we get to the free education when we talk to college professors like Michael Leroy, Andrew Zimbalist. We got Robbie Gold, the
high school football coach Robbie Gold.
Yeah, high school and an all-time Bears leading point scorer. Friend of the show, Rich Eberwein, also a Cubs contributor. Ken Smaller from Last Comiskey. We got into Devin got us into some local minor league baseball stuff, talking to Mike Vershave of the Windy City Thunderbolts, Curtis Hogg with the Kane County Cougars, Sean Hunter with the Chicago Dogs. Of course, friend of the show, Jonathan Hood, an old name for Mercado and I going back. And of course, and someone in the city that also does Chicago sports radio. Dave Hamilton from the National Gay Flag Football League. Eric Kramer, former Chicago Bear. It was amazing talking to him this year when he released his autobiography.
And it's crazy when you think about Eric Kramer, though, because he almost got the Detroit Lions to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, 30 years.
And here we are now. 30. You said 30 years later, it could happen again with Jared Goff, and then 30 years from now, we have Jared Goff on the show talking about his book.
I hope not.
We had a graphic designer, Emily Morgan, on after she rebranded the Bulls logo with the shrug in the middle of the whole thing, and then later she did the Bears logo, which was a decent rebrand as well. Dr. Drew Dewerson, Mike Mercado, author / Rattlecap with his new book that he came out. Rafael Esparza, I believe he's an odds maker. Mercado, you got to talk to him a little bit about sports gambling.
Former Vegas sports book, and you can get the book Luchadog at luchadog.com.
EJ Snyder, someone that Mercado is now working with on a regular basis, doing the Bear Era podcast.
Want more Bear content? Bear Era podcast, if you can handle any more Bears in your life.
Shameless plug.
This is the time you can talk about the Bears on Bear Era, so Paul doesn't butt in every 10 seconds saying move on.
Caleb McNeely, the Frontier League MVP, so more minor league baseball there. Fred Mitchell, another big name, local, Chicago Tribune, the legendary Fred Mitchell we got to talk to. Eddie Griffin, a producer with WTTW in Chicago. We talked about the Black Sox as they released the Chicago stories about that. Marver was kind enough to get us Chris Holtman, the DePaul basketball coach.
Exclusive
interview that we talking to him about his up-tempo play with the DePaul Blue Demons in his first year as head coach of them. Justine Siegel, who's going to be starting a women's baseball league coming up in a couple of years from now. So Devin was kind enough to get that one. And I don't think I left anyone out. I really tried to look, an exhaustive list of everyone that was on the show this year. But if I forgot anyone, I'm sorry. And that's an impressive list of people. And we got to do, that's the bar for 2025. That's where the bar's set.
So thank you to Devin and to Paul, who really, and Marver obviously for
yourself.
But I want to make sure I say thank you to the three of you for bringing some amazing guests to our audience, and to our audience for being so receptive to our guests, because it is truly a community here that you try to build with your audience, with your guests. And I think I am so lucky that I get to be in a lot of those conversations that are heard here on the Sports Cubicle. And I want to thank you guys for that amazing list.
And I do want to say, if this is your first time listening to us, thank you. We're typically on Sundays at 9 p.m., everybody. And if you're listening to this replay at 9 p.m., hello, everybody. We're going to be on from 4 to 6 for,
3 more weeks.
3 more weeks, Paul. Thank you. I'm trying to get the exact number. So we'll be here for a little bit.
So, Mercado, we'll start with you. What stuck out, out of those guests, or maybe some of the stories that we covered? Not so much the biggest stories of 2024, but, we also kind of have our own little niche, the things we like to focus on, whether it's Chicago, whether it's some sort of media or controversial sort of thing in sports or progressive lens, or however you look at it. What were some of the stories that you liked talking about, or some of the people that you liked talking to that stood out this year?
Yeah, so sentimentally, I loved going back and forth with Robbie Gold with our little friendly banter of District 214, Rolling Meadows versus Elk Grove. I obviously loved Eric Kramer being so vulnerable with us and being so open with us. One of my favorite things has been the four of us, or when it's just two of us, or if it's just by myself, speaking with smart, educated people on subjects that really impact us more than just on the field. So when we got to talk to professors about the economic input of a new stadium, like Andrew Zimbalist joining the show, was something that I think really opened up a lot of ears and eyes in that time, because it was just rose-colored glasses. People were talking about a new stadium. And we had somebody come in there and tell us, this is what happens when you go down this road. This is what you should expect. This is what you should demand. So I love that. And the simple fact that so many people that were in the middle of either winning national championships, winning MVPs in their respective leagues, took time to join us, and they weren't so stiff, that they were loose and they had fun, and it almost felt like they were chums with us. And I take a lot of pride in that. That if you go to YouTube right now, you search the Sports Cubicle, you'll look at our playlist of interviews of 2024, every single one of them seems like we're friends with these people. Because our goal here is not to catch you on anything. It's to have an open conversation. So I'm proud of that. And those are the ones that stick out to me.
Yeah, there's various times where I think talking to someone, we kind of got them to open up a little bit, or ask them a question that they weren't really expecting us to do that much homework on, and have them be like, wow, you guys really researched, or got them to talk about maybe something that, I think whenever you get a chance to talk to someone that maybe a lot of people get to talk to, sometimes you want to separate, with your line of questioning. There's obviously the storylines, the things that kind of come up naturally, but, sometimes when you get their audience for a minute, sometimes you want to talk about something specific, and I think of Kelly Amonte Hiller and UFC, and that was like a little nugget that I kind of gave you that I heard in like one of their broadcasts, and she was just really impressed that you knew that, and how she incorporates her love of the UFC into how she coaches, NU lacrosse, and then of course with that interview as well, trying to get her to say "Go Cats," which is really easy because she ends every interview with that, so that was exciting for me to hear from her, and just some of the names that whether they're offered to us, whether it's just kind of we kind of came up with them on our own, the creativity of the moment, and who should we should talk to at the time, and I just like that, we're a sports outlet in Chicago, and so we've got to get guests too, and sometimes we're going to find people that you might not hear on some of the other outlets in this town, and I think that's what makes us kind of unique, and our guests as really special guests on the show.
Marver, we know who your favorite guest of the year was. What was it about getting that together, the relationship with DePaul, and what it was to finally kind of make that finally happen? Finally, the entire story was fulfilled, having that part of the Sports Cubicle in 2024.
In terms of DePaul, as many of you know, I've suffered through, gone to a lot of games over the years, and I did go to school there and whatnot, and I actually was on the first radio broadcast of DePaul basketball many years ago. I was not on the air. I was actually doing stats. Wasn't good enough to get on the air. So this is like a bucket list for me 50 years later to be on the air. But in any event, so I just went through the assistant athletic director, Peter Tambasco, and he was kind enough to tell me the contact, and it was not that difficult. But at that point, they had just started practice. They hadn't even had their Blue Demon Madness, which was going to be that night. And it's such a unique situation, an entirely new roster, which is kind of like what's happening in college basketball now anyway. But in this case, they went from a 3-29 year and went into the portal and got mostly mid-major players, and they really have more depth than they've ever had as a result of that. And they've won 9 games, which is way more than 3 last year, obviously. But this interview, it was really he was really opening up, I thought, about his journey from Butler, Ohio State, and then coming to DePaul. He was maybe going to do media even, but I think that the $1.5 million that he's getting helped, and then he was still going to get a big chunk of change from Ohio State. So whatever that agreement was, convinced him to do this, and it's a good fit because he has the reputation with Butler in the conference, and Ohio State for a few years he had 20 wins, but last couple weren't that good. So I think that he has the skill set to turn it around. But in my opinion, they will never be a champion of the Big East. And as they stand 9-4 with 18 games left in the conference, if they were to go, let's say, even 4-15, 4-14, they'd end up below 500, which is probably what's going to happen. So they've already lost to Providence, and they lost to St. John's, and now they have Connecticut coming up. So it doesn't get any easier in that conference. I've always argued that there was a bad decision to be in that conference, but it has been a good decision in all sports except for men's basketball.
But I think, even with all that being said, for us to finish that story and having Coach Holtman on the show was kind of a nice bow on that kind of thing that we've been really trailing this entire time with the connection to DePaul. Devin, all the guests that we've had on here, from Fred Mitchell to Emily Morgan, thank you, Paulie, for setting up this entire list for us to be able to really get flowers to all these people. Anybody stick out to you? Anything really excited you? Anything that still to this day you really look back on and you're like, I'm hanging my hat on this for 2024?
Let's just take a look here. We got, as much as Paul hates talking about it, we got 2 former Chicago Bears on the team. I'm on the team on the show.
Yeah, close enough.
Something you really would never ever think to get around there. And going back to it all, I look at this. We have Curtis Hogg, who won. His team, the King County Cougars, won the Miles Wolf Cup, and the Chicago Dogs, who lost them in the final round going in there. So not to say much, but if you want a team to win, maybe come on the show. Jerry Reinsdorf, George McCaskey. Oh, excuse me, that cough was just awful, guys. But definitely just, a lot of this too, and one of the fun things that none of y'all ever talk about, the times the 4 of us can get together. They're few, they're far, they're through Zoom a lot, but some of those are just my absolute favorites, and the 4 of us can get together and just kind of shoot the stuff, definitely talking about sports, and get paid for it. Yeah, if we get paid. But there's just been so much there. It's been a crazy year here. Just looking back at the list as a whole, just on a lot of these stories to talk about. It's like, oh yeah, Shohei Ohtani. Before he was, being primed to be the MVP again this year, he was in a huge bunch of doo-doo for some gambling.
Well, why don't we do that? So not only did we have some great guests on the Sports Cubicle in 2024, we covered some really interesting stories. Paulie, you went through the list and you found some really interesting ones. Devin brought out the entire Shohei gambling controversy, which seems like a lifetime ago. Do you want to go through the list of some of the things that you were able to highlight that you found that we talked about?
These were things that kind of we talked about, whether it was a deep dive into it or just something that we kind of touched upon. But just without listing every single topic out of the 50 some odd shows, obviously the Shohei gambling controversy, how that unfolded, and he's off the hook. In a year where AP picked him to be the male athlete of the year, and he wins a World Series and finally crosses that off of his bucket list. Announces that he gets married this year, and just yesterday announced that he's going to be a father. So
yes,
it's
congratulations.
A big year for Shohei Ohtani. So just kind of covering him in general and just kind of how the Dodgers unfolded was a big story. Recently we did the Juan Soto's contract and how big that was. Middle of the summer, the Olympics and Paralympics took up a lot of our content, a lot of this show. Of course, the biggest story in sports probably was the WNBA's popularity and Caitlin Clark, and locally how Angel Reese plays into it, and that was always something that we kind of kept up with here. The nepotism with Bronny James was kind of always talked about, but just how baseball is kind of turning into the next generation. The Jackson Holiday, Bobby Witt Jr. I want to say that there's another holiday coming up up in the draft soon here. Andrew Jones' kid, I think, is probably coming up at some point. Manny Ramirez, I think, has a son. Of course, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. already in the league. There's so many various examples in sports. And then I think Tiger Woods recently was saying his son finally beat him in a round of golf. I think the first 9 that they played recently, I don't know if that was an official tournament or not.
He had a hole in one.
Yeah.
Little Woods.
Yeah, so I mean, it's just the apple is not falling far from the tree in some families, but Bronny James, of course, getting an NBA roster spot, despite many believing that he probably would not have been looked at by scouts in the NBA draft had his name not been LeBron James Jr. But also even entertainment in sports, we kind of talked about that, and I know that I kept Mercado kind of from talking too much about the Paul brothers and the Mike Tyson. Of course, now we got coming up to a possible Logan Paul versus Conor McGregor, but it is an interesting sort of thing in the sense of how these are unsanctioned bouts, but it's changing the scope of enthusiasm and eyes watching a sport that was failing. So as much as that you want to say that this is a circus, which it is, the Paul brothers are bringing new excitement to boxing to a new generation when people were thinking 5 years ago that the sport might disappear and die. So, and that's, it's an entertainment factor. It's bringing Netflix into the game. We talked about Joey Chestnut getting kicked, quote unquote, kicked out of the Nathan's Famous hot dog thing, although that was by choice because he was promoting, I think, like tofu dogs or something like that. Ends up having a fight with Kobayashi, a battle with Kobayashi in the hot dog eating arena. Of course, not an actual fight, but the two greatest ever to take down hot dogs on Labor Day fought each other.
This is a family show, Paul.
Yeah, and then the media landscape as it continues to change. TNT with the NBA on TNT, like going to ESPN, even though it's still a TNT property. That's just one example. There's been all sorts of. We talked earlier about Chicago Sports Network and that sort of thing, and how regional sports networks are changing as well. So that's such a generic topic, but that's always going to be something that we talk about. But it felt like in this year that the media landscape is continuing to change at a very rapid pace, and that we're still in the weeds on what it's going to look like once they figure out the streaming era and once they figure out what's going to happen with the big cable and satellite and over the air and all of that stuff. Settlements in the NCAA, of course, with NIL or unionization of athletes. Are they technically employees of the universities? That's an ongoing thing that we're going to see litigated in the courts, and there actually were some of those cases got some sort of resolution this year. Utah becoming a hockey market all of a sudden, that's been exciting, and there's been a huge amount of enthusiasm. The A's moving to Sacramento and possibly Las Vegas afterwards. If you remember, MLB uniforms were quite shabby at the start of the season, and of course a lot of changeover. Pete Carroll and Bill Belichick leaving the NFL. My Jurgen Klopp leaving Liverpool earlier this year. Rafa Nadal retires. Andy Murray, Alex Morgan, Aaron Donald, and Joey Votto amongst the retirees. And then on the local level, Derrick Rose, Candace Parker also retiring, and Mongo, Julius Peppers, and Devin Hester making it to the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, and it's funny because Bill Belichick leaves the NFL to go to the North Carolina Tar Heels.
Who would have thought?
I don't think he knows what he's getting into with NIL and recruiting. He's never done any of that.
There has to be something. It's not either he's setting up his son for a future job. Obviously, he's going to get a job, but like a future job. Or he just knows.
Well, he likes to coach. We know that.
Yeah, he loves to coach. And I think part of it is like because it's such a business that he almost feels like, well, the only difference now is I play on Saturdays.
Yeah.
Like it is such a business where you go on a transfer portal, you get a decent quarterback, you coach your defense up, you could win a couple games. You just need to be one of the top 12. So for Bill Belichick to do it for 3 years, and we know he loves young people.
Yeah.
We know he loves young people.
I was just going to say, like he gets to see his girlfriend and get paid.
Yeah. Well, I don't think he's going to pull up in his Mercedes to the prospect's house himself, but I could be wrong. He's going to send somebody else to do that.
Is he going to wear like a tattered North Carolina hoodie and on the sidelines?
It will be disappointing if he doesn't. Like if he doesn't show up wearing tattered up North Carolina. What are we even doing here?
It's just a hoodie. That's all.
Obviously we've been talking about this entire time. The media landscape continues to change. Regional sports networks are disappearing. You're watching Christmas games on Netflix. Amazon has Thursday nights. Inside the NBA is going to be on ESPN for the big games and the finals. You have Paramount Plus, Peacock. You have all of these different streaming services that are hosting the big ones. It's only a matter of time until the Super Bowl is off of network television, is on a streaming platform for crazy amount of stupid money.
Well, you can already watch the Super Bowl on Peacock every year.
Yeah, because it's part of NBC. When it's on NBC.
Not every year. Yeah.
So when it's on NBC.
So it's Paramount when it isn't.
Yeah, exactly. So what happened?
I think Hulu or Disney when it's not on that, or when,
And so how long until it's just off of television? And it is pay-per-view. Because these streaming
the NFL app.
It could be anything. Like everything is an app right
live
now.
event. Pay-per-view's long gone.
All right.
Premium live event.
All right, WWE, I hear what you're saying. That's another thing, right? Like the TKO merger of UFC and WWE. We're seeing these big companies go together and these, for lack of a better term, monopolies happening in all these different sports. And that was 2024 had some really interesting things because we also saw the Olympics, and we've talked about is World Cup stuff before, during, and after. That's coming down the pipeline. Like the business of sports has really, and this has obviously been a thing over the last 10, 15 years, but 2024 was more of a staple, especially a few years now past the COVID pandemic world of sports we lived in, that these corporations, these entities are big-time moneymakers, billions and billions and billions of dollars. And from Joey Chestnut and Netflix to Mike Tyson and Jake Paul, the landscape and the way you consume this is all different. Look at the way YouTube handled the Red Zone this year. The amount of money they were charging people, the amount of people who still did it because the NFL is such king. Watching the 12-game playoff now for the college football. And how much money and Notre Dame being in it, what does that mean for ratings?
I was going to say Red Zone having commercials for the first time ever. That's wild.
And people just absolutely losing their minds.
As they should.
So that is where we're at right now, though, is everything is what can we monetize? How can we monetize it? I remember a few years back, people talking about the sanctity and the tradition of jerseys and certain things that you can't, the hollow grounds, you can't touch that. It's only a matter of time until all your favorite teams and all your favorite sports look like a NASCAR vehicle. That's it. It's just a matter of time because it's all about the money they're generating. And at some point, and I think we could see it here of the end of 2024, the sports media bubble bursting is on the horizon. You can see it. They are all trying to make all their money right now. They're trying to get their money from Netflix. They're trying to get their money from Amazon. They're trying to make sure that all their streaming deals are done, that regional deals are done. They are trying to get every single dollar off of what is the most important entity in any programming, and that's live sports.
And not only is Turner involved in the NCAA now, and they get the finals every other year, they had two of the first-round games of the college football playoffs, and I believe that, isn't the Amazon Prime going to be involved with the NBA in October?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's streaming is king.
And I'm for it as convenience because it is from the tip of your fingers. You have your fingertips, right? It's being able to watch these games.
And it's really digestible. If you only wanted to watch one game, it's like, are you willing to spend $6 just to watch one game and download an app? Yeah, probably. That's less than a movie ticket.
So then, but then here comes the question: is knowing full well if the NFL starts putting a bunch of games on, how long until, and Netflix already does this, how long until Netflix asks for another increase?
Absolutely.
And another one. Like
they're going to do that anyway.
To begin with. But now they have the biggest thing on their catalog, which isn't just shows that you can stream, it's live programming. There is something to the golden goose that is live television. Then Breaking Bad, maybe the greatest show of all time, right? Or The Sopranos, and you name it. It's still televised. It's episodic. That's not sports. Sports is live programming. It's unpredictable. You could watch it on social media, but if you miss it, you miss it. It happens only once. That's why it's worth its weight in gold. It's just how long can these companies continue to afford these crazy contracts?
And also let the fans be darned, because when are the Bears playing Green Bay this next week? They're not going to decide till later this week. So let's say the fans don't know when to show up, what time or anything. And even they flex at the games, but this is the last weekend. They do that on purpose so that they can have the competing teams playing at the same time, for the playoffs.
So I think those are just some of the stories I think that piqued our interest, and thank you again, Paulie, for writing those down. But I think it's time. We got a few minutes left. why don't we get into our athletes, our game, our champions of 2024, okay? So I actually, Paulie, you did some great stuff of setting us up here at the show to give us some notes on who had a great year, who did special stuff, champions, winners. Obviously, you had the Kansas City Chiefs, the Florida Panthers, the Boston Celtics, and the LA Dodgers, along with the Michigan Wolverines in football, the UConn Huskies in men's basketball, college, South Carolina Gamecocks, women's college basketball. That was a crazy finals within their own, that Final Four. And Northwestern women's field hockey. Shout out to NU. The Kane County Cougars. Shout out to them. The New York Liberty, the LA Galaxy, the Orlando Pride, Joey Logano, Real Madrid, Manchester City, and Bayer. How do you say that one, Paul?
Leverkusen.
So those are just the champions. In Paris of 2024.
I mean, I leaned on soccer, obviously, but I also got some tennis in there.
No, you got a bunch of tennis.
Football.
Scotty Scheffler for majors. Who do we have? Bryson DeChambeau for PGA Championship. Or the U.S. Open, excuse me.
Scotty Scheffler for the Masters, Xander Schauffele for PGA Championship. U.S. Open was Bryson DeChambeau. The Open Championship was Schauffele again. And then for men's Grand Slams in tennis, it was Yannick Sinner for the Australian U.S. Open, Carlos Alcaraz for the French in Wimbledon. And on the women's side, it was, and I'll never be able to pronounce these names, but Aryna Sabalenka won the Australian and U.S., just like Yannick Sinner did for the men's. Iga Swiatek won the French Open, and Barbara Krejcikova won the Wimbledon.
All right, so what we're going to do, because we're running up against the clock, I have a list here of
He's making
check it in twice. Worst Chicago sports moments, best Chicago sports moments, worst moments of the year. This is all in the sports world. Best moment of the year, female athlete, male athlete, athlete of the year. I'm going to go from my list. We're going to go around the cubicle, all right, to give you guys a little time to be prepared, okay? So the first one is worst Chicago sports moment here on the Sports Cubicle. And mine is the 2024 Chicago White Sox. Pretty plain and simple. You break the record, worst record in baseball. Things don't look any better because you didn't get the #1 overall pick. I don't think it's really a stretch to say that. That is the worst Chicago sports moment. It's the entire 2024 Chicago White Sox season. Paulie?
I said the same thing, but it's crazy to think that as it stands right now, I think the White Sox have a better winning percentage than the Bears do this
Isn't that
year.
insane?
So,
yeah.
I mean, I know it's a lot different. They play a lot more games in Major League Baseball. They should not have lost 121 games, but yeah, that was my worst
Can't be ignored,
moment.
Can't be ignored, though. Marver, worst Chicago sports moment?
Well, I was going to think that it's more than a moment with the Sox. It was like many moments multiplied. So, I mean, I had it written down, but I wasn't sure if that was a precise moment. I mean, was there a single play? I mean, one moment I thought of was the end of the Commanders-Bears game.
Yeah.
There was a pretty bad moment in and of itself.
Yeah, in a single time moment in itself is that, or I think the block field goal against the Packers. Those would be it. Devin, are one of those or something else the Bears did, or is it the White Sox?
I mean, the White Sox are just we knew they were going to be bad, and they had the record of all time, but it's like, it's so cliche, but let's take a real look here. We all knew the White Sox were going to be bad. I don't know if Paul and I thought they were going to break the record, but it definitely seemed like it. But a team that a lot of people had hopes were, Paul, cover your ears really quick because I'm going to say the B word, the Chicago Bears.
No, it's just obviously you guys need like another 2-hour episode to deal with this.
Next time.
At least.
773-763-9278.
Stay tuned next week, 4 p.m.
But basically, I'm going to go with Marver here. That Fail Mary and that blocked field goal. And the I've never seen a returned field goal my entire life here against the Vikings, and I definitely feel the Bears as a whole probably worse because we had such potential and such high expectations. As you said, not just, it was just Chicago. A lot of people put a lot of eyes on this team, and I definitely feel all the eyeballs on this team being garbage when it's supposed to at least have a winning record is pretty disappointing.
So the best Chicago sports moment for me in 2024 is Caleb Williams and Roman Dunze being drafted by the Chicago Bears. Even with a terrible record, even with a lot of bad games and frustrating games, the only highlights on the Chicago Bears team seem to be Roman Dunze and Caleb Williams. So if you're looking for one thing in one of the worst years in Chicago sports, it's that you might have yourself a quarterback and wide receiver for the next 5 to 7 years. Marver, what do you think is the best Chicago sports moment?
I mean, things are so bad that I might have to pass on that one. But in thinking about it in great depth, I mean, obviously Caleb #1 was a good thing, but I didn't think of that myself. I'll go with that because I don't think Chicago deserves a best moment.
I don't think you're wrong.
All right, hear me out on this one. I don't really like that they shut down downtown Chicago for a NASCAR race.
Interesting.
But both years it was awesome because the rain came to be a part of it.
Yeah.
And so if it's going to be sunny, I want no part of it. But if it's going to be chaotic and rainy and disastrous, I'm all for it. So bring on the rain at the NASCAR race. That was the best moment of the year.
You're such a chaos cat. I love you.
You do the same thing in the WCPT parking lot.
Yeah, that's right, too. Devin, best Chicago sports moment.
Well, I'm going to leave Chicago a little bit. I'm going to go west, or maybe I should say I'm going to go to Northwestern Medicine Fields here.
I knew he was going to do this.
As the Kane County Cougars won the Miles Wolf Cup, and the thing about the Cougars is no one thought this team was going to do anything this year. They thought the Chicago Dogs were going to go back-to-back here. And let's be real here. It's a Chicagoland sports team that won a championship this year. And unlike all the other teams, this team was predicted to not even be there, kind of be middle of the road here. The Bears were predicted to maybe take the wild card. The Cubs predicted to also maybe take the wild card. The White Sox, they're predicted to not die this year. And all those teams proved us wrong. And if one team proves us wrong to win a championship, who am I to be? So, Kane County Cougars, Curtis Hogg, get back on the show and let us throw out the first pitch. Or let me hold the Miles Wolf Cup. That's all I really want.
So here is my worst moment of the year, and it's a tie. On May 17th, Scotty Scheffler is arrested the morning of the PGA Championship.
That's right.
And on Sunday, September 8th, Tyreek Hill is arrested the morning of the Dolphins season opener right outside of Dolphins Stadium. This is scenarios where I'm not going to, let's just say, eager police officers and uncooperative athletes came together and made our mornings really interesting and chaotic on two big days of the sports calendar. So Scotty Scheffler, the morning of the PGA Championship, getting arrested, and Tyreek Hill in the season opener getting arrested. Those are my worst moments that don't have to do with death in the sports world of 2024. Devin, what is your worst moment of 2024?
Worst sports moment of 2024.
Could be anything.
Worst moment, 2024 election. Do I have to say anything else?
I guess that might have a sports connotation to it. For me, personally, it was Jurgen Klopp stepping down. I wasn't ready to say goodbye to him with Liverpool Football Club. But in a not too distant second for me was Ray Gun performance at the 2024 Paris Olympics. That was kind of one of the worst moments in sports.
Best costume of 2024 of Halloween is Ray Gun. Yeah. Marver, what is the worst moment for you of 2024?
The worst moment of 2024?
In all of sports.
How about in banking?
Oh, that's fair enough.
No? Okay, I'll get sued. But but in terms of sports, I mean, obviously, we had high hopes too for some of us for the Cubs, and maybe we'll give you a whole month. They started out in May, like it was 10-17, and they never climbed out of that hole. So it was like you could, like we all do, the Cubs fans, hope is eternal, and they never got there. They were 83-79 again. So that was more than a moment, but. You know, what can I do? My dad was a Cubs fan.
God bless him. And God bless all the Cub fans. So we're going to do rapid fire for athlete of the year.
Best moment of the year.
But best moment of the year is in August of 2024 when Simone Biles wins team, the vault, and all-around gold at the Paris Olympics. Yeah. I think securing her status in the sport, securing her status on athletes in worldwide sports competition, and seeing her bounce back from what was the last Olympics and the trials she went through. I think Simone Biles and what the U.S. gymnastics women's team, the way they handled so much adversity to be stripped in gold in Paris in August 2024 was my best moment of the year in sports. Paulie?
Best moment was Freddie Freeman's Grand Slam in Game 1 of the World Series. I went crazy when I saw it live.
It's a great one. Marver?
Well, I was going to go with repeating Super Bowl champs in overtime. The pass by Mahomes to make it 2 times in a row for the first time in 20 years. Kansas City Chiefs Super Bowl. Maybe they'll go for a three-peat now.
I hate to agree with Marvelous there, but yes, well, I shouldn't say I hate to agree. Yeah. I hate to agree because it's the same, but yeah, the Super Bowl, back-to-back in overtime, and it was a rematch of the Super Bowl from 2020, so it was definitely nice to see something. It was a really good game overall.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think you could have gone so many different ways on who was the best moment of the year. But I think it's time to finally give out the big awards. So, Female Athlete of the Year, I'm going with Caitlin Clark.
Ditto.
For me, it's a tie between Clark or Simone Biles, one of those two.
So, I
guess, yeah, why did you guys favor Clark over Biles?
My Clark thing is not only the rivalry that she did with the Final Four, Angel Reese and South Carolina, the explosion of the WNBA, and there's so many ballers in the WNBA, so many amazing players that now, and it's not any fault of their own, but because of the popularity that women like Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark, their rivalry, and how great they actually showed up and were about it and lived up to expectations. Think about the expectations Caitlin Clark had. And she overextended them. She overachieved. She didn't win a championship, but she delivered. And it may not be the same in 2025. It may be tougher in 2025. Simone Biles is a GOAT. She didn't have to prove anything to me. Caitlin Clark, with the feet on the fire, showed up, balled out, and the WNBA is such a great sport, and having her part of it, having everything that affiliates with her, even the bad actors, is only good for the sport. I'm going with Caitlin Clark.
The Cosmo eyeballs in terms of the TV coverage, even with regard to the NCAA tournament, and then with the WNBA, they moved the games out of high school arenas into the NBA arenas, except for Chicago, of course, where they could have put 20,000 in there, but they didn't. They have 10,000. That's what they did. So. That's what happened. There was the dollars were expanded exponentially, despite whatever she gets from State Farm.
And then it with Asia Wilson and some of these stars, Caitlin Clark now has rivalries in the WNBA. It will only continue to grow. Female Athlete of the Year.
I'm going to tie between Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese because we got to stay local, obviously, guys.
Okay, not bad. Male Athlete of the Year, I mean, we all agree, it's Shohei Ohtani.
Yeah.
I mean, it has to be Ohtani. Who did you go?
Well, why Ohtani and not Aaron Judge?
It's just there's only so many times you could deny a unicorn, and I think we continuously find a way.
Completely different.
Let's
go to Devin first.
Yeah, I thought it was obvious it was going to be Shohei. I would love to hear you guys.
He's up there for sure. AP's pick. I understand it completely, but I was like, well, wait a minute. Doesn't he get canceled out by Aaron Judge? And are we discounting maybe something else that happened in the sports world?
Sure.
But his team won.
His team did win. It was a World Series, yeah.
I have a little bit of a hard one here because I did not necessarily pick a male athlete here because I had a hard time here. But my sports person man of the year is Dan Campbell of the Detroit Lions here. What is this football team that everyone has been watching and rooting for since the beginning of this year? The Detroit Lions. People wanted them in the Super Bowl last year. Or ticked off when they didn't make it. And this year, everyone's saying the Super Bowl that people want is the Bills versus the Lions here. And I had a hard time really picking just one person from the Detroit Lions. So I'm like, Dan Campbell is the man I got to pick for athlete or sportsman of the year.
Actually, I love that. And you were going with?
Mondo Duplantis, the high jumper, the pole vaulter. That
shout out to him.
Broke his own record once again, as some pole vaulters
broke the internet.
In the middle of their peak do. But yeah, he broke his own record in the Olympics this year, 6.25 meters in Paris, France. Broke his previous record of 6.1 meters. That's crazy. That he went from just in the World Championships, just like a couple of centimeters away from getting his own record. I don't think a lot of people know about him, and I learned about him this year, watching him do it and just watching it unfold live. It was really neat to see, and he's one of the most dominant people at his sport, and I don't think track and field always gets that sort of love unless it's like a sprinter.
It's the main one, yeah.
The
100.
So,
yeah.
Shohei is a great pick, but I thought, he just canceled out by the fact that his team was, Freeman was the one that had the great October or the great World Series. Judge also had a great year this year. You could argue that both arguably had one over the other. That would be a whole show right there who had the better one. But I thought Mondo Duplantis needed some love. But we got to get to Team of the Year.
Team of the Year is the Kansas City Chiefs.
I have the Dodgers. But either way, I have the Chiefs for my backup.
Yeah.
I have the Dodgers, but it's a tie. Dodgers, Chiefs. Either way,
Celtics get no love.
Yeah, no, they've got too many championships.
I'm sticking with the Detroit Lions here because they've taken over the Cowboys' role of America's team. They could probably take that slogan, and other than people in the NFC North would agree.
Proving Gen Z that you don't have to win championships to be beloved.
Your heart is going to be so broken in about 2.5 weeks, my boy. This was absolutely so much fun. We're already at the end of the show, boys.
No.
We've already done it. 2024 has come to an end. We finally put a bow in what was a great year, a frustrating year, a fun year, all of it mixed in together. Any final thoughts, guys? We'll be back next week, 4 to 6. We have the replay later on tonight.
What time?
9 p.m.
There you go.
You can check out Paul here on this very station at different times. He's on the Big Picture, right?
I'm filling in sometimes, but I have no schedule.
There's no schedule,
anymore.
but you hear his voice here. So if you guys are ever interested, our WCPT listeners, Paul also does some great commentary work here as well. So make sure you're doing that. Devin, if you're used to it, is always on the ones and twos here, and you will hear his voice sometimes on some of our breaks. And you'll hear me on the News Minutes and right here, of course, on the Sports Cubicle with Dan Marver, Paul Shivari, and Devin Tinkle. We want to thank all the amazing listeners of the Sports Cubicle. Because of you, we're able to do this show. Because of you and your support, we are able to continue to do it with good numbers, good interaction, because we have a great, smart audience that is really receptive of us. So I just want to say thank you to Devin Tingle, to Paul Shivari, and to Dan Marver for being the best co-hosts, great buddies, and amazing co-workers around the Cubicle. Anybody want any final thoughts? I'm Mike Mercado, Bear Era Podcast, Sports Cubicle every Sunday. We're here on WCPT 820. Check us out on the SoundCloud, heartlandsignal.com. We're on YouTube at the Sports Cubicle, and we will be right back here on next Sunday.
Yeah, we'll see you next year.
Lord help
Happy
us.
New Year.
Happy New Year.